half an hour, there's probably a couple of things that I would like to do. I'm going to assume that everybody has got an interest in communications in the cloud. You've either got a plan, you want a plan, or you want to know what to do, or you might even think, I just need to understand whether I need to consider any of those things. So I want to have a look at what's happening with cloud communications. I want to talk a little bit about what you might think about as you go down that road. And as I do that, I'm going to talk about some things that are really good to think about, and some cautionary things that you should think about, so that we can get on the table things that might cause you a challenge, as well as might cause you a great deal of promotion within your own organisations. And then at the back end, I'm going to have a look at how might I think you should do that, and what we've been doing. So if anybody's got any questions, I've only got half an hour, so I'll take them as we go, but if we start to run out of time, then we can perhaps do them over coffee. So there's loads and loads of things happening around cloud communications. I guess it wouldn't surprise you to know that it's probably one of the largest communications growth areas. So we've been through IP telephony, we've been through unified comms and all of the elements that sit in that, and now we're determining whether we move all of that into the cloud. So the largest growth areas have typically been in North America to date. So cloud deployments of communications are considerably larger than they are anywhere else in the world. However, most people are catching up. And I think if you just look at some of the growth areas here, they're probably all uniformly growing. I suspect that across EMEA and the Asia and Asia Pacific areas, we will certainly see them catch up with that kind of growth that we've seen in North America in the last couple of years. We're sort of predicting that by the end of 2018 there'll be over 60 million users of cloud. Now of course that's a global number, so if you put that 60 million into the context of how many global users of communications there are, it probably only represents a relatively small percentage of that, but the growth is phenomenal. So if I think about the start of what I think is happening, so I guess the view according to Lisa, I see the whole kind of economic industry changing. So as things are starting to improve, I think the economic climate is changing for the upturn slightly, starting to see a little bit more money being spent, starting to see some increase in the job market. Not sure how that will be in a week's time after we've had the general election. I guess only time will tell. But that general upclimb in the economic situation probably focuses us to think about a number of things in our business. So I guess being agile, predicting change, being the drivers of change, not being caught out by our competitors, understanding what technology we need, what technology is changing, what's driving our general business arena, probably starts to come to the forefront of our minds again. That perhaps focuses on people. I think we all want to attract and retain the best people in our businesses. Quite often I go and do some seminars about this subject particularly, because that's quite often driven by technology, especially if younger people are coming into an organisation, the technology tools that they expect, that they want, consumerisation of IT. So, it's important for us to be thinking about those people, and that of course means that in your businesses you're focused on driving how competitive you can be, so that none of the top two areas ever let you down. So if we're focusing our business objectives on being more competitive, spending a little bit more money, growing our businesses, and we look at our IT challenge, because we're only now starting to see the economic upturn, in a lot of cases, and I appreciate not all of them, we've probably seen that our IT infrastructures may have been going at quite a slow speed. So maybe we've seen that our general core data infrastructure perhaps hasn't had a lot of investment in recent years. We may see that some of our security systems perhaps haven't been upgraded in recent years. Perhaps some of our management systems have not had investment. So that whole infrastructure has been working at quite a low level, which means that there's a lot of legacy platforms in there. There might be a lot of legacy switching information in there. And that's causing us to think that, well, if all of this is now old and lacking investment, what do we do about renovating that core? And I think if I look back probably over the last, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years, and I think to renovate infrastructure, typically those have been projects that have had to have a defined budget, perhaps a defined team of people working on them. They might have required some consultancy to help you decide where to spend your money. They could easily have been programs of work just to upgrade maybe a data infrastructure that could have gone on for 18 or 24 months. So typically quite slow, long-term, laborious processes. But of course, on the other side, if we look at our business and our business departments, there's an awful lot of things happening there really, really quickly. So to be competitive, lots of departments will be saying, I need analytics, I need statistics, I need to know how I'm performing. I've got a huge flexible working program that I have to deploy. I want to offer staff mobile working. I want to allow their consumer devices in the organisation. I need to deploy a contact centre. But of course, that's fine to want that. But if this infrastructure perhaps has lacked investment, then it may be difficult to deploy some of those things that actually affect the business and to affect them quite quickly. So what might you do? Well, you might think in those scenarios to start off with that you would exploit the new. So if I think about perhaps do you have a flexible working program or a contact centre that you want to deploy, but you don't want it to be dependent on this side, you might choose to do that via the cloud. And what we can do is think about how we remove the interdependencies between those two things. So you have to think then about what your deployment options are. And I think there's two things that you could think about today, and that's if you are looking to upgrade your infrastructure, update your communications, provide new services, you could of course continue to do that in a traditional on-premise scenario. And there could be many, many reasons why you would choose to do that. So you could take perhaps from Mitel some software, provide it in our server, one of your own servers, in a virtualized environment of VMware or perhaps Hyper-V, and manage all of that yourself in that traditional environment and continue to put technology wherever that needs to be. None of that will change. You could of course decide that, you know, I think I want to do the cloud. I don't really know why yet, but I'm nervous about removing on-premise and traditional infrastructure. And that is completely understandable, and that would put everybody in the boat with probably 99% of all businesses who are thinking about cloud communications. So my suggestion would be that if you think about cloud communications, your mind focuses here. If you want to do your communications, you think about how you could do all scenarios at any time and switch between the two at a time that is appropriate for you. And we'll have a look at how you might do that in a moment. But don't forget, so this is the first piece of caution that I would urge when you think about cloud communications. It's not only about thinking about the top level communications, it's about thinking about what sits underneath. So what other infrastructures do you have in play? So is it a Microsoft infrastructure? Is it that you are hugely reliant on Salesforce perhaps? This drives your business. You deliver communication solutions through this. Could it be that you're a sugar CRM? You know, you could well easily say to me, well, you know what, Lisa, I'm going to be a Skype for Business user. That's my priority here. So I'm only interested in this level. Help me deliver that. So don't forget this piece. Where are your business applications and what communications sit right through them? And the very last piece is, if you think about communications, your largest investment has probably been at the bottom line, because these are the devices that tend to be most expensive. This is where you will have spent all of your communications budget. I would suggest that you don't want to get rid of them yet. There should be no need to change them. If you want to move up to the right-hand side of the cloud, consider how, whether it's a fixed handset, a mobile handset, some kind of unified communications that you're deploying on a tablet, how all of that remains the same. Because I don't want to see anybody today be doing what happened probably between 7 and 10 years ago when we moved from TDM to IP, and that was to say to all of the users, I'm replacing everything you ever had, all of this changes, and you've got to change your mode of operation. Mode of operation should not change because you're moving the top level infrastructure. So think about how you keep all of these. So you've got 3 steps there to think about when you're thinking about moving your communications to the cloud. So kind of what's happening, and if we think about whether you're a, I guess maybe a sub 30 user business or perhaps a plus 10,000 user business, there are multiple trends that are driving some of the decisions that you may choose to make. Now, small businesses perhaps, I think I see them today as being a little bit more mobile, perhaps less office-based than they ever were, because they're looking to put people in the right place. They're looking for certain to free up resources, so they're very interested in public cloud. So their interest in public cloud is quite high. If I think of the far end, larger enterprises, they've probably got reasonable teams of IT people that can manage all of those layers of thought. Probably more interested in private cloud. So those lines are beginning to cross, and if you know, I can leave these slides with you so you'll be able to read all of the words in between and make some decisions over whether you're interested in a public environment or a private, maybe something like a VMware or a Hyper-V environment. But that's what's tending to happen today. Not 100% rule of thumb by any means, but perhaps that's just where we tend to see some of the trends. So, Jonathan said why they're seeing some of their customers buy cloud. I've got a couple of examples, and they tend to fall into about 4 or 5 quite specific areas. So the first one is, I hear people say, our strategy is to move everything to the cloud. Absolutely everything. The number one reason for doing that perhaps has been because they want to focus their resources on core operations rather than resources in managing a communications infrastructure. So that's a dead straightforward thing to think about. The one I like the best, we need access to technology now. So that's my example. If I think about communications, that is usually something to do with mobility, something to do with flexibility, something to do with contact center, something to do with customer satisfaction, customer interaction. Could be that the technology in place is just old, so the technology upgrade needs to be now. A cloud-based solution works better for our business. Usually true for things that might be highly distributed. So anybody who's got lots of offices, that comment would almost certainly sit more appropriately with those types of businesses. Cloud offers a lower total cost of ownership. So here's my, I guess my next real point that I would like to say to consider. Really important to think about this. I hear an awful lot of conversations about, I'm going to save money, my return on investment is going to be high. I'm going to say the answer to both of those is yes, almost certainly. I would always urge caution and say, be absolutely certain that you work with somebody like Britannic to help you work through that process, because they will help you define very, very easily what your plan of upgrade should be. If we think about when we all bought on-premise equipment, we were probably writing that down maybe over a 7-year period. If we're thinking about what we're doing with cloud, we're probably doing 3-year return on investment, maybe 5. So think about that very, very carefully, because how you may have justified your cost savings with your last purchase, you may be justifying them very, very differently today. So it's really important to work with the right partner, because they will help you manage that and manage all of that infrastructure correctly. And the last thing is, it will support our growth. So if you think that you will have a need to grow, and add new users quickly, cloud is definitely going to be the right thing for you. I would also say, of course, there are times where we shrink something. Cloud is also right for that as well, because what you don't want to do is be in possession of hardware today. If you need to shrink in, cloud could be the right thing for you. Again, work with the right partner to do those numbers, because as your businesses ebb and flow, which undoubtedly they will in the next couple of years, this is definitely the right model to consider. So just work with the right partner to do that. So 3 pieces of advice really. First thing to do, if you're going to do cloud communications, is to decide what are your business drivers. So I've just listed a couple here. You know, is it the top 2 and it's financial? Is it that you have a business issue or a department issue? Is it around being more agile? Is it around customer interaction and customer service? Is it purely a business continuity issue? So think very carefully about what it is that's happening in your business. You will have done that the last time you bought a communications upgrade. It's not changed because of cloud. Second thing to do is to determine what elements that you need to give all of your users. And I've seen some surprising things in the last couple of years where organisations have gone, yes, I'm going to buy cloud, and I've whipped up this £1.50 per user per month deal. And I've said, oh, okay, so that user's no longer a mobile user, are they? And they're no longer got some manager secretary features. Why did we forget about all of that? Because we didn't forget about that before. Yeah, you know, we need to be careful that we don't forget about those kinds of things. So, why are you doing it? What do you need to give people? Plot your matrix, then talk to the solution provider, and they will work that back for you. They will work all the financial numbers back for you and help you understand CapEx, OpEx, number of years for your return on investment. And if we don't forget that, then we won't make a mistake as we all move forward with cloud. So, and then you can think about taking advantages. So I'm going to go for shared services is an absolute given. Whether that's important to you or not, shared services is an absolute given. Think about your costs. Think about access to expertise. Now, Jonathan and his team will have a large number of experts that can manage all of the elements around deployment, network connectivity, network management, application management and application integration. That's why you choose to go to an integrator, because you have access to expertise. The need for that hasn't gone away because you're thinking that it's in the cloud. You may just be handing that to somebody else to help you with. We can think about improved security. So typically our cloud would be in a tier 1 or a tier 2 data center. So all of the security features that we expect around that will automatically be in place. And that removes that thought process from anything that you may have to provide in your businesses. Because you've got that security, typically the connectivity into those data centers will automatically provide that level of business continuity. So where you may have been thinking about hardware business connectivity, hardware resiliency, hardware redundancy, that is now removed, and all we're thinking about is the business continuity into those data centers. Almost certainly that will be provided as part of the solution that you purchase. And you can, of course, get better connectivity. Now, my next, I guess, word of caution. If you are in the southeast of the country, you are certainly going to get better connectivity because all of those data centres have got loads and loads of capacity from multiple types of organisations. I was with some people last week who were in North Wales. Not so great for them. So, you know, if you talk to an organisation who tell you that their top of the list is connectivity, be sure, because actually I think it's a lower thing that's on the list of priorities for you to think about. Just make sure that that's not the number one thing that they're looking to offer you. And I guess the last one, repeating myself, is flexible capacity, because the capacity becomes somebody else's issue to manage. You're not thinking about how you license that, the delay in purchasing licenses or the delay in expense of purchasing hardware. You have handed that over to a third-party provider and to your system integrator. So the things you have to consider then, if I just do a reminder before we have a look at how you might move, don't forget the features that support your business. It's really simple to forget them today. Is software assurance included? You don't want to buy a cloud solution that won't ever be upgraded, won't keep pace with the software that the manufacturer is buying, because if it doesn't have that, it's never going to have the right features to support your business. So ask those questions, ask Britannic those questions. What have you purchased from Mitel in terms of software assurance? How are they delivering those new features all of the time? Because of course, I would say to you, the biggest advantage of cloud is if I deliver new features on a Monday, why can't you have them on a Monday afternoon? Because they're going to come through that software assurance. They should be automatically downloaded. That's just part of your return on investment model, whether you want to have them or not. How does it support my growth? And again, how does it support something that I might need to reduce? What's the time period for that financial model? Again, don't want to repeat myself, but think about the time that you may have written something off last time you purchased to the time that you may be doing that modelling this time. There is a change between traditional enterprise hardware and cloud modelling. What about security and compliance? Now, if you have some very specific compliance issues, don't forget to talk to Britannic about them. Don't forget to talk to them about the security policies. Sadly, there have been widely publicised breaches of security across all sorts of global businesses in the last couple of years. Talk to them about those tier 1 and those tier 2 data centre security issues. And don't forget your connectivity. So you've got a couple of options of how you buy cloud communications. First choice, I think, and I don't think you can see this, so apologies for that. Bottom left-hand corner, I guess consumer buying. You could log on to a website and say, I want 20 users of cloud, please, and buy it a bit like you were buying broadband. What are you going to get there? Some connectivity, some basic telephony. Fine if that's what you need, probably not appropriate for anyone in this room. But don't get caught up into that. I see a lot of people offering log on and choose a package. It's kind of not going to have business unified communications applications included. You could go to a bespoke offerer. Awful lot of opportunity to buy that today. Word of caution, be careful here, because you're probably buying this and then a cost for all of the other elements on top. So you tend to find, oh yes, you bought a small package, more underneath. So just be careful of that. Be cautious of how you price that. You could go for an option that you would purchase cloud communications from Britannic. And obviously I'm going to say that is absolutely the right thing to do, and I know you're going to say, well, you're bound to say that, aren't you? And I guess the answer is, well, if I didn't think it was the right thing to do, I wouldn't have put that chart on the slide, because I could easily have got away with that. The things that you need to think about is cloud isn't straightforward. There's lots of things to think about, an awful lot of things to think about, but they're not new things, they're things that we know about. But in terms of managing everything for your users, how you might roll that out, you should, and it would be my highest recommendation, talk to and work with a partner that can think about what you need and just work them with you. There'll be many things that Britannic might suggest to you that you just don't need. I would suggest that the peace of mind is that knowing that they thought about them, even if they were written off. There will be things that you won't have thought of, and that could be around the infrastructure, it could be around the devices, it could be about future consumer technology that we know your people have got in their pockets and want to use. So that is why you always wrap that proper service around choosing who you go to purchase your cloud communications. So you've got a number of deployment options. I want to talk to you about, as lots of Mitel users, what the Mitel option might be and how we would work that with Britannic. I'm always delighted really to say that if you've been a Mitel customer for many years, I hope you're happy that we've always tried our hardest to protect the investment that you've had. While we've made lots of changes along the way, and we've moved from very old traditional analog telephony through to analog and digital, through to IP, through to unified communications, and now to cloud, our software has moved through that era with us, while the hardware has changed and seeped out the bottom. So I want to have a look at, I guess, what that really does look like. So back in, goodness, about early 1970s, sadly I do remember this, I installed many of these and had many bruised and bloody knuckles through pulling in lots of hefty backplane cables. Our telephony was in something that looked like that, and it kind of stood this high and it was kind of this wide, and we networked them together, and it had some software, the brown circle, and you connected analog and digital telephones to it, and it took up huge amounts of space, and we had big racks where we did lots of wiring. A little while later, when big wasn't great and you all told us we need to put hardware at the edge, along came small cabinet, the SX2000 Lite. The big cabinet went, the cards that were in it went to the edge. Software remained the same. We had newer versions, but it kind of remained the same, and we still connected our analog and our digital phones. And then we were clever enough to fibre connect those cabinets. So it didn't matter where you wanted to put them, one business up or down a riser, huge campus across large distances, you put that technology at the edge rather than in a large room like this. What happened then? IP telephony. So that was nice and straightforward. The brain, the mother in the middle, we just removed, and we inserted the IP platform. You could still keep all of your analog and all of your digital, and the software all remained the same. If you wanted to then to start to deploy some IP telephony, well, you could do that, because all that happened then was you added some licensing. So our software was the same, our phones were the same, our hardware was the same, but we could incorporate the new. And over time, you would have migrated away from analog and digital cabinets and just had all IP. And all we did was add licensing, but the software, of course, travelled with us, so the users never did anything different. If you were a heavy kind of analog user, well, we gave you lots of options to mix and match and put all that telephony at the end. Lots of people who are in the hotel industry took hotel type cabinets from us, and that was fine. Everything remained the same. A couple of years ago, what happened then? Well, the old concept of private cloud came along. So we had the same. We'd removed our hardware that sat in the middle, and you had a number of options. You put that software on a server that I gave you, you put it on one of your own, or you put it in a VMware virtualized environment. Licensing remained the same, handsets could remain the same, software remained the same. Last year, we also provided the opportunity to put that into a Microsoft Hyper-V virtualized environment. So driven by our customers, rather than perhaps driven by something that we wanted to achieve, because the largest amount of virtualized users are in the VMware environment. So, private cloud. So that brought us up to about 2 years ago. We go back to thinking about those people who still have hardware, because you don't have to do private cloud and VMware. Things have started to change, and the requirement perhaps for a change to private cloud or the introduction of public cloud is important. So we now have public cloud, Britannic's data centre. So that's our software. You'll notice it's still brown, it's still in the brown circle, so it's still the same old software that's come from Mitel. It's just now in somebody else's cloud. It still has licensing, but of course the difference now is, in this scenario, I license that to Britannic, and that's in their cloud. How they manage that onto you is entitled to them and the arrangement that they have to do that. The devices that we have, well, they've changed over the years. What are they likely to have changed from? Well, they were analog handsets, they were digital handsets, then they were IP handsets. Today, they're IP handsets, or probably they could be SIP handsets of some kind. But none of that's changed, none of that's changed. It's just in a completely different environment. So if you are a Mitel customer today and you've got either a hardware solution or a virtualized solution, it's relatively straightforward for you, because all you're doing now is talking perhaps to Britannic about how you remove the piece that was in the middle and put it straight up there, and what you do with these elements. So it kind of puts an interesting dynamic on how you work your total cost of ownership and what your return on investments will be. And that's why you look to go to an integrator, because they can take all of this solution and they can move it straight up into their own cloud for you. The great thing is all of the things that your users have today, they still have. None of that has changed. They don't operate differently. The great thing is if they have more and they want more, you just add your licensing and you deploy that solution. I like to offer it like this, because if we think about my step one, what's happening in your business, and my step two, what features do you need, I kind of like it to be relatively easy, because I think, well, most users have some voice, some people want some instant messaging, they might want some telephony presence, they might want video, they might want a full suite of mobile applications, so that's a full mobile active smartphone or tablet. They might want some collaboration. As you do your step one and step two modelling, plot it against a chart that looks like this. Jonathan's team will help you do that. And then you can just put your users into a couple of categories. Relatively straightforward to do that. So again, it's easy for me to say, I think we've got the best, most appropriate move to cloud model. But again, I'm going to say that, so I don't have to say that, because fortunately, the global analysts that I suspect most of you look to, if you need to take some consultation, have gone and said it for me. So we were really delighted that last year Gartner recognised us as a leader in unified communications and collaboration. At the same time, they recognised us as a visionary in unified communications as a service, and most of that was driven from that moving to providing software as a service and the features and benefits that came underneath. So we lead, and we've got a huge visionary. But it wasn't only Gartner. Frost & Sullivan made some interesting comments that were very similar about our hosting capabilities, having the broadest option for move to cloud and the broadest amount of devices that you could have underneath. And their colleagues, Synergy Research, have said that we are the absolute #1 provider of cloud communication endpoints. So, I hope that gives you comfort that if you were to look to the vendor who should provide the software, that would be Mitel. And my suggestion then would be that as you work through determining why or when or how you move to the cloud, that you think about what your business needs, you think about what your people need, you think about your future growth, that you then say, Mitel's the de facto. All I need to do now is pick those 3 things up and go and talk to Jonathan's team about how he helps me do that. And whether you want to say, I'm going to replace everything with cloud, or I'm just going to do something, that's fine. Because the hybrid model of having a bit of both works nicely together. just some numbers. I'll leave the slides with Sheridan. She can share them with you so that you can see how many kind of seats we have. If you need to talk to those people, Jonathan's got so many customers that he can share with you. If you need more, he can talk to me and I can help you talk to some of these people who are doing some of these cloud seat deployments.